Hello, parents. It's me again. First quarter is done and over. We've been working really hard with the kids on some reassessments to try and get caught up. The kids have been doing a great job. Just wanted to let you know some things that we went over this week. This week in 8th grade math, we worked on graphing linear equations and slope. We also worked with finding the slope of a line. This was what we did towards the end of the week. And then also drawing lines through graphs when we were given a certain slope. We also worked when we were either given a table of coordinates or a set of coordinates, like I have here, in finding the slope of that line. It's very important for the kids to get a good, firm understanding of drawing those lines and understanding how to find the slope of a line, because that's going to help them in the second part of Chapter 2. We just took a brief assessment today. So far, the ones I've gone over, the kids have done really well. We assessed over this concept up here, the very first concept, in two-step equation, a single step with involving a fraction, and then just a y equals equation. I also threw in their integers. I got a very strong belief from the high school teachers that the kids need to be very strong in integers. So I'll be reassessing the students on integers all year long, just to make sure that they're still having a firm understanding of how to work with integers. Other things that I wanted to make sure that I went over next week, we're going to be working with identifying similar polygons, as well as working with finding missing sides of similar polygons. We'll do that kind of the beginning of the week next week. And then we're going to jump right into section 3 of chapter 2, which is working y-intercept equations and drawing slope. So on my previous slide, you'll notice that we had an equation here where the kids had to go through and pick their X's, or like here, the X's were given for them, and then they had to substitute in and solve for Y and graph that. So I'm going to jump over the smartboard really quick and kind of go through the things that they did this week. If you look at this first example, the students were given X's towards the end of the week. This week, they actually got to pick their X's, but they worked on substituting in. So for example, here, if I were to substitute in -1, we would do 2 times -1 minus 3. And then that's what they would use to figure for their y. So 2 times -1 would give them a -2, minus 3 would give them -5 for their y. So they would fill in -5, and then they would graph this. So this is -1 comma -5. So I'd go over to -1 and down to -5, and I would put my dot. Okay, so then they were required to do at least 3 x's. This one this sample I have here has 4, but they were required to do 3 x's. So if I substitute in a 0 this time, where x is 2 times 0, 0 minus 3 would give me -3. So I'm going to go over to 0, stay at 0, down to -3, put my dot. And then if I substitute in a 1 where x is, that means 2 times 1, which gives me 2, minus 3 would give me -1. So we'd go over to 1, down to -1, and you'll notice that they end up creating a nice perfect line. The last one, 2 times 2 would give me 4, minus 3 would give me 1. So I'd go over to 2, up to 1. And then the kids would go ahead and draw lines through these points that extended all the way through the graph. And what they were doing was graphing all possibilities that could fall on that line, okay, by graphing 3 or 4 points. Other things that we worked with is finding the slope of a line, and that's where we work with rise over run. And the kids had another review worksheet on these concepts on the bottom of the screen here today. So I oftentimes draw a little, almost like triangle, because it's just easier for my eyes. And then I count the number of boxes that it would go up. So between my 2 points, I had to rise 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes. And the run was 1, 2, 3, 4. So the slope is 6 over 4, which would then reduce down to 3 over 2. Okay, and this actually was a positive slope. If their line had gone down from left to right, then it would be considered a negative slope, but here it went upward from left to right. And I try and remind the kids, think of a bank account. If it's going up, that's a good thing. If it's going down, that's not so great. They also worked on actually graphing slope. So here in this example, we have -2. Well, slope needs a rise and a run. So they have to remember that if they have a whole number, it's really over 1. So here I have a -2. We're going to write it over 1. When they graph it, if it's negative, they're going to go down if their graph is big enough. If it's a positive slope, then they're going to move up. And then they actually end up going to the right on all of these. The only time that they will ever do anything different than that is if their graph isn't big enough to be able to follow those moves. So here, if I go through and I do -2 over 1, I would go down 2, 1, 2, and then I would go over to the right 1. So here's my dot to create that slope of -2 over 1. If I do the same thing on this other dot, 1, 2 over 1, and then I can draw my lines through those. And you'll notice that when we have two slopes that have the same, or two lines that have the same slope, it actually creates parallel lines. The other thing that the kids worked on at the very end of this week was finding slope from a pair of coordinates or off of a table of coordinates. So the formula that we use is y minus y, so it's our change in y, over our change in x's. So here, the y's are the second one. It's just like the alphabet, x, y. So we're going to go ahead and just substitute in. So we've got -7 minus 6. And then we're going to write that over 2 minus a -1. So we have to put that -1 in with it. Now if I go ahead and I simplify this, -7 minus 6 is the same symbol sum. So I get a -13 over, these two make a plus sign. So 2 plus 1 equals 3. So their slope is actually -13 over 3. Okay, and that's what the kids have most recently. That's the most recent thing that they've worked on. They got a worksheet today after their assessment to kind of practice drawing slope, counting out slope, and then doing this last one of the 2 points that were given. Other things that I wanted to make sure that you were aware of is next week, if your son or daughter needed picture retakes, there is picture retakes on the 23rd. So that's next Friday. Not exact sure time because they'll kind of travel around to all of the schools. So I'm not sure what time they'll end up being here. That's pretty much all I have. Next week, we won't probably do any assessments because other than I will do STAR. I will do STAR next Friday. And the other thing is next Wednesday, we have an early out. So I didn't want to forget that. And I'm going to plan on doing some conference goal setting with the kids on that Wednesday so that they're getting ready for their parent-teacher conferences since they are student-led. That's about all I have for you this week. So have a good weekend.